hosted by Chicago Audubon Society, Chicago Ornithological Society, and the Peggy Notebaert Nature Museum to showcase underrepresented voices in the birding community. And I'm Judy Pollack. I'm the president of Chicago Audubon Society. And tonight we have special partners, the USDA Forest Service and also Friends of the Forest Preserves. And so we're really happy to have a broad group of partners for this really great talk tonight. We're really excited to be hearing from Audrey Peterman tonight, who's going to be presenting this program, Audrey Peterman and the Dr. Bird. I'll talk a little bit more about Audrey in a minute, but I just want to tell you a few things about this presentation. One is that we are recording. So if you would like to be a little black box, you can go ahead and do that, or we'd love to see your face. And then the second thing is that we have muted you. So you'll need to unmute yourself if for any reason you need to talk. And if you've got a question or a comment, please enter it into the chat box. The structure of our program is going to be that we'll hear from Audrey for a little bit. We'll see a few of her slides. Then she's going to have a conversation with Mike Rizzo, and then we'll take your questions from the chat. So we're eager to hear what you have to say, and please put it in the chat. And yeah, and I think people are probably very familiar with Zoom at this point, but if you don't know, down at the bottom, there's a little button that says chat. If you press that, you will see the chat, and up in the corner, you'll see something that says view, and you can play with the different views up there. Okay, so I am very excited to introduce our special guest tonight, Audrey Peterman. She's a wonderful author, and I strongly encourage you to get the book that she's going to be talking about tonight. It's terrific. I'm reading it now. And she's also the president and co-founder of Earthwise Production. She initiated the Diverse Environmental Leader Speakers Bureau. She served on many different boards and received many awards and honors. And she has been practicing in the intersection between racial justice and conservation and outdoor recreation for over 20 years. So she's got a great amount of wisdom to share with us. And I've known Audrey for over 5 years, and she's truly a special person. She's warm, she's spirited, she's wise, and she has a great, authentic voice. And I am so delighted to be able to introduce her to you tonight.
Yay! Thank you so much, Judy. I love that description and that very warm welcome. I am so appreciative of you and of your team and of all the sponsors and partners that you have brought together to put on this program. I remember that you reached out to me from last year, pre the COVID era, and I know that you've been working very hard to get this together. So I really want to compliment you very highly on getting the kind of collaboration that it takes to do something like this. I want to thank everybody who was chosen to join us. Yes? Is there something wrong, Judy? Okay. I continue. I want to thank everyone who has taken the option to join us, because I recognize that in this time when we're social distance and unable to be together, it's really important that we find opportunities to come together around our common cause, particularly the cause of conservation. And I'm particularly elated this evening because I don't know to what extent you're aware of the news that Jeff Bezos just dropped $791 million on organizations fighting climate change. And any organization fighting climate, of course, is bound to be beneficial to conservation and our particular focus of birds this evening. So I'm talking to you from here in Jamaica, where I really think I have the better part of this deal, because I see that there are people from Ely. I've been to Ely, Minnesota. I know that it tends to be a little frigid, but then you probably like the cold. But I am coming to you from very warm Jamaica, where I actually have a Dr. Bird outside of my veranda multiple times per day. In fact, it has become so commonplace now that this evening I was coming from the laundry and I could hear the whirring of its back legs. It makes a noise that alerts you to its presence even before you see it. And it is such a resplendent bird. But I'm here tonight to talk with you not just about the Dr. Bird, but um, Judy asked me to talk about the book, my new book, From My Jamaican Gully to the World, in which I talk about how I grew up in Jamaica and the freedom and the immersion in nature that I had as a young child that set the foundation for my life in conservation, even as I did not know that it was happening. So I start the book at the place where I grew up in a little village called Summerfield in Jamaica and New Roads. And it was the kind of place where everybody knew everybody else. I was fortunate that my house backed up on a little river, a flowing stream, which we in Jamaica call a gully. Nobody knows where it starts and nobody knows where it ends. But I can say I love to play in the water. And I had a deep hole right behind my house, which was a great draw for other children in the neighborhood to come and splash around in the water. We had overhanging mango trees. We had overhanging coconut trees. So mangoes would come bobbing down the river. And we children, of course, would splash around and grab for them. And there was always enough for everyone. That concept of there being enough for everyone has really been a central factor in my life. The fact that I don't need to compete, there is enough for everyone. Another part of my childhood that I love talking about is the fact that I used to sit on the banks of the gully in the evenings while I was doing my homework. And I would watch the little fish going by in the water in their own, I mean, it was like a giant aquarium. I could see occasionally shrimp propel itself out on its tail from under the banks. Occasionally, I even saw an eel. As I sat there by myself, the wind blew across my face. I could feel the solace of it. I could hear it rustling in the trees, and I could hear the little birds rustling in the underbrush by me. I spent many hours on the banks of that river, getting really inculcated into nature. So when I moved to New York in the 1970s with my 7-year-old daughter, I was always looking for that kind of large scale nature. I was looking for that respite. And I finally found it on a large, massive scale when shortly after my husband Frank and I got married, we decided to take a trip around America to discover the great, beautiful places we'd only heard about, the Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, Yosemite. So in the nearing the end of summer 1995, Frank and I took off from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, on the Atlantic coast in our little Ford F-150 truck. You know, we had bought a tent and sleeping bags and other camping gear and equipment, and we drove 12,000 miles around the U.S. But I have to tell you, the first major place we stopped that was unlike anything I had ever seen before in my life was Acadia National Park. And I like to describe how we drove into Acadia, and I found it to be one of the most beautiful and attractive, appealing cities. So many white buildings, low slung. And then we proceeded to Acadia National Park on the outskirts of Bar Harbor. And I'll tell you, to see Cadillac Mountain jutting out of the forest with the forest like a fringe below it, I describe it as looking like a hula dance, a hula skirt, and driving up the mountain, around the mountain, up and up the mountain until we could see the clouds below us. And still we were going up the mountain. And then when we got to the top of the mountain, we were deposited into an arena of such unearthly beauty. I thought we must have left Earth and arrived in heaven. Seriously, I had never in my life envisioned anything like that. And I come from the country that is described as so very beautiful. So standing there on top of Cadillac Mountain, watching the Atlantic thundering onto the rocky shores on one side and being able to see on the other side the sprawling blue water with little tree islands with trees growing on them and the sun coming down and just falling on the water and turning it into molten gold. Oh my God, I had a religious experience or a cathartic experience, however you describe it, a transformative experience. Because looking out at all of that beauty and purity, I saw myself in it. I saw that as that is beautiful and perfect, I must be beautiful and perfect too. And so I saw myself then as beautiful and perfect, and I have seen myself as beautiful and perfect in the intervening 25 years. And I never expect to stop. I tell you, it's a wonderful feeling to fall in love with yourself. And it's even more wonderful when you feel so minute, so infinitesimal, and yet so much a part of the grand scheme of life, so much a part of the oneness. So besides falling in love with myself, I fell in love with all of creation. And that feeling has never left me. So very shortly after Frank and I left Acadia and went to the Badlands and went to Yellowstone, where nobody had told me, I'd never even heard that there was not just one geyser, Old Faithful, that we all know of, that in fact Yellowstone is chock full, has half of all the geysers on planet Earth. I didn't know that. I couldn't understand how there were, grizzly bears and bison, some of the biggest mammals on the North American continent. And there were some places the ground in Yellowstone is just about thickness of a potato chip. And yet, here they have evolved for millennia, for eons. So it was actually while we were in Yellowstone National Park that I first noticed the words National Park. Because I remembered I had seen Acadian National Park, Badlands National Park, and now we're in Yellowstone National Park. So I said, what the heck is a national park? Because I did not know. I did not know that such a thing existed. I just thought these were beautiful places that we were going to see. So when I found out that there was such a thing as a national park system comprising national parks from one end of the country to the other, and that they were supposed to be protected and maintained for the benefit of this and future generations, unimpaired for the benefit of this and future generations, and that there were, hundreds of forests and wildlife refuges, I really got a little angry because I was like, well, how is this possible for me to have been here all these many years, almost 20 years, and not know this part of the world, not know this part of our country, and especially that our tax dollars pay for them, and that, they are the natural, cultural, and historic legacy of the American people. How could I not know that? And how could so many people that I know not know that? But to go back to our journey, we continued across the United States to Washington State. Wow. We went to the rainforest. I can't remember the name right now, but we went to the rainforest in Olympic National Park. I never even knew there was a rainforest in America, right? And coming back from Washington State, we went to Sequoia National Park in California, stood among those giant 2,000-year-old sequoia, giant sequoia trees, felt the energy of those trees, felt the reverence, the cathedral-like space that we were in. We went to Yosemite. We went to the Grand Canyon, the natural wonder of the world. My goodness, when we came back to Fort Lauderdale, our eyes were continually as big as saucers. And almost every person that we talked to, we were babbling, wanting to tell them about the great, expansive, stupendous beauty of America that we had seen. And people were like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then after a while, we actually saw people like, oh my God, here come those Petermans, they're going to tell us about all these places again. So we decided that, evidently people lacked knowledge and information in the same way that we had lacked knowledge and information about the national park system. And we decided, Frank and I, that instead of complaining about the dark, we would light a candle. And so we started our business, Earthwise Productions Incorporated, in order to provide consulting services to the National Park Service and the public land managers. And we've managed to do that with varying degrees of accomplishment over the past 25 years. I am very happy to say that in recent years, and I'd say in the last 12 years or so, there has really been a surge of interest among communities of color in national parks and the public lands. And I am finding that while the agencies are making some progress in outreach, the interest that has been generated in our communities on the ground is really what is propelling people into the great outdoors. Almost never a week goes by, I would venture to say, that I don't get some information on Facebook. I don't get hit up by somebody who has formed a new group, a new climbing group, a new birding group, um, a new hiking group, a new cycling group, a new people are really eager to interact with the great American outdoors once they become aware of it and once they are pleasurably introduced to it. And I emphasize pleasurably introduced because in the old days, in the 1990s, and also in the not too distant past, since the turn of the century, many people that we have spoken to have indicated that they have some antipathy and some fear around the idea of going into the outdoors because they don't necessarily feel that they would be welcomed or made to feel safe. So I feel that that is decreasing, but given the current situation that we're in, I really am uncertain that I can say definitively that the fear that that people have reason for the fears to subside. Personally, I say I refuse to be afraid because freedom is not given, freedom has to be taken. So I will not allow myself to be intimidated from going any place where I want to go. I wanted to say early on that, the pandemic has put us all in such a situation where we have had to mask ourselves individually, and to a large degree, the mask conceals some of our features. But what the pandemic has also done is unmask our country in a very unpleasant way that has, but necessary way, I think, since it has shown us the inequality that in the ways that the various members of our country and our community are treated. So when I thought of putting this piece together called the Dr. Bird and Me this evening, my focus was on the Dr. Bird as the resplendent national bird of Jamaica. It really holds almost a place of myth and magic in the eyes of Jamaicans. And when you see the image that I'm going to show you next, if you haven't already seen it, you will really fall in love with this bird. My message, though, is in as much as the Dr. Bird is resplendent and gets so much attention and so much value, I put as much value on the common ground dove, which may not merely be as resplendent, but has its own niche, its own value. And to me, that value is the equal of the Dr. Bird or any other bird or any other creature. My focus is that we're at the place we find ourselves now, we desperately need love. We desperately need to stop the ranking system that we have assigned to each other. People who are deserving and people who are not, and largely by virtue of color, which is not something that anyone can control. I like to open my presentation sometimes with a picture of the Milky Way galaxy. And I point out that everyone that I know and everyone that you know is on a tiny, tiny planet in a distant solar system on the edge of the Milky Way galaxy. None of us knows how we got here, and none of us knows how or when we're going to leave. So, we're all vulnerable. We are all part of the human family. And all of the distinctions that we have made against each other, black, white, and we have ascribed qualities to these irrelevant factors and built up entire societies and rankings based upon them. I would say to you tonight, just as I'd like to consider the common ground of the equal of the Dr. Bird, or the equal of the Arctic tern, which is my all-time favorite bird as it flies an incredible distance, from Alaska to South America. A journey that I hear can be as much as, well, I'm not even going to go into mileage because it differs so wildly. So I want to suggest that we use this time of the pandemic to develop a consciousness, a value about ourselves, that we value not just the things that we have artificially ranked as important, not just the humans that we have artificially ranked as important, as greater and lesser, but that we start to see all human beings as part of the family of humanity, equally deserving. Instead of the question that is so often asked of Frank and me, how do you get more people of color involved with the environment or with the outdoors? Maybe the question should become, how did we manage to keep so many people of color outside of this movement of being engaged with the outdoors and the environment? How did we manage to keep them on the outside? Because I can tell you, in my experience, I feel that there have been underpinnings underlying this whole ethic of, you know, some people are valued in conservation and some people have no value or perceived to have no value in conservation. Instead of looking at how we engage people, we might want to be thinking about how are we going to explain to people when we go out and say to them, which we should, you know, we'd like to invite you to our park, to the park we manage, or to the forest. We'd like you to invite you to the historic site. And here are the things, some of the things that you can do while you're here. And when they say to you, well, why are you inviting me now when you've been around for 80 years or 100? What is different now? And you can say, I heartily agree with you. We should have invited you earlier because this belongs to you as much as it belongs to everybody. But our country is evolving. And let us say that at this point, where we are, where we have been shown, all of us, to be equally vulnerable to a pandemic that is, you know, has just claimed 250,000 of our fellow citizens. Let us say now, we choose to be different. We choose to move forward together. And we're inviting you to come out and enjoy and be part of and help safeguard and protect these places that are natural, are national treasures, and all upon that.
Thanks so much, Audrey. Now we've just got a few slides that we're going to run through of Audrey's, and then we'll go to a conversation
Yes.
with Mike. Okay. See if I can bring these up here. And we'll start the slideshow.
Excellent. Okay, fantastic. So that's the cover of my book, and you can just go on, Judy. Ah, who doesn't love that bird? See the tail feathers? That's what I said. They make the clicking noise so that when the bird is flying, you can hear it even before you see it. And there is a common ground of, right? Not nearly as exotic and resplendent, but just as valuable and with its own niche and relevance and importance. That is a house where I was born and where I lived until I was 7 years old. Yes. And behind it, Judy, is the gully. Yes, there's the gully. I was just there in October of last year in my pre-pandemic life. And yes, my little cousins that still live there, the gully is still the feature, the central feature of their lives and all of their adventures with their dad and their little friend. Yes. Ah, this is a breadfruit tree. I wish everybody knew what a breadfruit is. It's about 5 times the size of a regular potato, but it's very delicious. And this breadfruit tree, my grandfather planted my navel string, that is my umbilical cord, under the roots of this breadfruit tree at the time when I was born. So I actually have a living tree that tracks my entire lifetime. And when I go there and look at it and see that it's still there, it's still strong, standing strong and bearing, I'm so excited. As long as that breadfruit tree is standing strong, I expect to be as well. Ah, yes, that's a copy. Obviously, I was meant to be a writer because you can see that's me from the second left, pouring over our high school magazine. Yes, Judy. Yes, an American Kestrel. We frequently see that one in a get-up tree here. So gorgeous. Yeah, the Jamaican woodpecker, it got our first mango this year. And that's Frank picture right outside our door. Ah, another shot of the ground of, yes. A Vervain hummingbird, these are, oh, I see 10 of these a day at least. And white-winged doves. This pair made a nest in an ackee tree down the field, but I did not see a fledgling. Yes. Next one, Judy. Oh yes, a bananaquit and a grassquit. These are frequent visitors to our veranda here. Ah, okay, so that picture is of Frank and me in Denali. Denali being the highest mountain on the North American continent. We went there birding. That picture is there for no other reason than that I love it and I thought you'd like to see it. And now that we're back home, we can go to our Blue Mountain National Park up in the St. Andrew Hills. And I am happy to tell people in Jamaica that the Blue Mountain National Park is a World Heritage Site, which means it's on the same level as Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, Yosemite, and all the others I cited. So one world. Yes. Okay, and now we're back to the book, end of the book. So that's my story.
Okay. Well, yeah, thanks. Thanks, Audrey. So now we're going to bring on Mike Rizzo, and he is an international program specialist with the USDA Forest Service, and he's based here in Chicago. And he's going to have a little conversation with Audrey.
Hi, Mike.
After that, we'll go to the chat. And then at the end of the program, if you'd like to stick around, we're going to divide people up into chat rooms if you'd just like to, have some time socializing with the other people on this call. So you can feel free to do that. So let me bring on Mike Rizzo.
Hello, everybody. Hi, Audrey. How are you doing?
Awesome. Thank you. How are you?
Doing well this evening. Thank you. And so if everyone knows, Audrey and I it's really a continuation of a conversation we were having since yesterday. And just to kind of get some concepts, some ideas out there, and then we'll transition into the question and answer. And one thing that struck me listening to the presentation and then the PowerPoint, Audrey, you mentioned that you said you're destined to become a writer. And I think more of you're an artist. You're an artist with words because I have sticky notes everywhere, taking notes as things you're saying. And but some of the other stuff that we talked about yesterday, we're talking about the bottom line is relationships. And a lot of us on here, we talk about relationship building. And for me, the foundation, it always goes back to my family. My family's, it's large, it's culturally diverse, different points of view. But I always say to my colleagues, my family's my focus group. If I can convince them, I can convince anybody about nature, about just about anything. What does your family think about what you do, about your love for nature, about your passion for the outdoors, for getting other folks in the outdoors? What do they think?
Well, it's funny you asked a question because my mother, before she passed away, I remember her asking me once, why do you care so much that whether or not African Americans know about their national parks? Why do you care so much? And my answer was, I really don't know. I don't know, but I do care and I can do something about it. So I'm going to do that. I'm really happy. My grandchildren and our blended family, they're very excited about what we do and very supportive. And of course, I have Frank. We've been married 28 years now, and he is my partner in everything. So I always have that I can always check him on anything. And we generally feel pretty much the same way about most things. But in the instances where we don't feel the same way, we give each other the freedom to not feel the same way. So I would say on balance, my family is very supportive. Several of our grandchildren have gone into conservation professions. So that's satisfying.
Well, great. The other thing I was thinking about, you described, we have a lot of birders here, obviously, with the Audubon Society and Ornithological Society. But you described the Dr. Bird as myth and magic. And I love that, the myth and magic of nature with the Dr. Bird. But in your book, you mentioned also about the most simple thing in nature is what attracts you, your eye. You're walking along the beach and you saw a golden flower and your friend stopped, and we had spoken about this yesterday. Your friend says, you know, she just thought you were kooky. And I think a lot of us as birders, conservationists, just enthusiasts with nature, you know, our families, our friends think we're kooky also. And it's just part of it, you know. And how did you learn to accept that kookiness and then really just and get it out there?
Well, you know, I embrace it. I feel very fortunate that I think because of my background growing up in nature and also growing up in that classic, that quintessential village, you know, the one where they say it takes a village to make a child, it takes a village to raise a child, right? That one. I always felt very independent. So my friends, even in high school and college, thought I was a little off center, but that allowed them to leave me alone. They knew I was not going to conform. So that gave me the privilege of being more of myself, being my authentic self, because I didn't have to try to conform to what somebody else thought I should be. They knew I was not going to do that. So I embrace the kookiness. I think that every person wants to be loved, wants to feel accepted. But the great majority of people can be afraid, tentative. They don't want to show their real selves because, you know, they came up in life being criticized, or they're concerned that they're going to be criticized, you know, or thought less of. Well, personally, I think a lot of myself, so I don't really worry about that, you know. And I think when people get to a stage of love, like I said, when I fell in love with myself and understood myself to be part of all creation and everything else to be part of that too, it gave me great freedom. It just freed me from all the concern about, you know, what people might or might not think of me.
Well, thank you. That's a great transition. I was going to ask you next. And so your book, your presentation, and just conversations we've been having, it's about journeys, change, discovery. And I think just like, you know, this myth and magic are the folks viewing right now, they relate to this. It's a journey that from your childhood looking in the gully at the fish to where you're at now doing the same thing. And
Yeah.
so with that, you know, it's finding that freedom in the outdoors, falling in love with nature, yourself. And so to kind of get back into what we were talking about in the beginning of encouraging folks to get outdoors, and, you know, with our folks on the line right now, you know, whether you're going to the Nature Museum or Eden Place Nature Center, North Park Village Nature Center, to one's backyard, how do we encourage people really to just overcome their fears and explore and find this freedom, whether it's just looking at that flower in your backyard or going out to a national park, a national forest? How do we progress and do that?
Well, I believe we need to provide information and an invitation. And by that I mean, I think that the pandemic and our enforced confinement now has really piqued the curiosity of a lot of people and their enthusiasm to go and explore the great outdoors. Because one, you know, some of the things that you might have put off in your life, thinking, oh, I'll do that when, you know, I'll do that when, and it's always someplace out there. People now are feeling I should do that now because they see that life is not promised. You know, so many people's lives have been cut short in a very, very short time. So I am reading that a lot of people are flooding into the national parks and the public land system. I think that public land managers need to find ways to send out that invitation, okay? To find that email list or to find that social media list, you know, or that social media grouping where you can say, look, we have these facilities here, okay? And we would love for you to come out and explore them. Here are some of the kinds of things that you can do. Here's what you will need. We need to reach out to people, find the people where they are, tell them what you have, and tell them, you know, how they can utilize our natural treasures. They're eager for it. They don't have to be persuaded.
That's you make me think, one of my colleagues, and I'm not sure if she's on the line, but Reverend Debbie Williams, she's with the Nature Conservancy, and she worked with the team at Faith and Place here locally. And they said, you know, information sharing is one thing, but the true engagement, that's the long term, and it's the storytelling, but it's the listening. And you really sum that up right now. I have one last question for you before we get to the question and answer from everybody. Is you've been in Chicago in the past. I know you've given you've spoken around not only the U.S. but abroad, and people ask you a lot of questions, and we have a lot of questions waiting for you. But what would you like to be asked? What have you not been asked that you would like to share?
Oh, that's a good one. I had not thought of that. But so I ask you I'll say my big side. I think I mentioned it before. The question that people should be asking is not how do we engage people, particularly people of color, with the public land system. They should be asking, how did we go through 80, 90, 100 years of public lands that are meant for the American people while excluding a significant segment of the public? How did we do that? And once you recognize and accept that you've done that, then the way becomes more clear for you to open the doors to people. Because I find that so many people obfuscate. They're trying to find all kinds of ways and making it, oh, it's so difficult. I'm like, really? I can get 100 professionals of color, outdoor people, on the phone now if you like. It's not hard. You just have to want to do it.
Well, agreed. Well, thanks. I think with that, we put a lot out there. So there's going to be a lot of questions. There's a number coming in the chat right now. I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie Bilkey of the Chicago Ornithological Society. And she's going to introduce the next segment and start with the question and answer, because I know a lot of folks want to hear a little more what you have to say. Thank you very much, Audrey.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Yes, thank you, Mike. Yeah, so I see a few questions coming in the chat. So if you have any more questions for Audrey, please enter those in the chat now. I have a couple questions here. The first one is, I'd love to hear how Audrey communicates the idea of the outdoors not being a frightening place for communities who have history that reinforces that scary idea. So could you speak to that?
Yes, of course. The easiest way to do it, and we, by trial and error in 1995, when we came back from seeing the parks, we published a newsletter, which actually was, a hard copy newsletter, because in 1995, you didn't just do something online, We sank our savings into publishing a newsletter. We published it for, I think, 14 years. And we put pictures of ourselves and other people of color in the outdoors having a wonderful time, because we wanted to speak to that subliminal fear by showing people that the national parks and the public land system are the safest places on earth. So all you have to do, make certain that in your material, whatever you're sending out, you include images of non-white people, because the environment and the outdoors has gotten so, over the years, so exclusively associated with white people, that if you only have white people in your material, you are sending the message that I am only interested in this segment of the population, or at least I can assure you that's the way it will be interpreted. You're not speaking to me.
All right, our next question from a participant is, are you hopeful in the progress we are making around matters of diversity and inclusion within agencies?
I totally am. And I am even more so now. Oh, let me tell you this quickly. So, two big things. Yesterday, a friend of mine called to say she's on the transition team, and she wanted to know what Frank and I considered environmental priorities. And I was able to direct her to a presidential memorandum on diversity in national parks, public lands, and waters that we, as part of the Next 100 coalition, got President Obama to sign and to issue at the end of it, near the end of his term in 2017. So it has all the things that we're looking forward to. And I was able to just send that to her so that that can go into the, the Biden-Harris administration, which is looking to be more inclusive of more perspectives on the environment. So I'm really excited about that.
That's great. I love to hear the optimism, and I know a lot of folks here do too. So our next question, well, also I'm just seeing a lot of positive feedback in the chat. Someone said, thank you for this incredible talk. You're a wonderful inspiration. And
thank you.
And then the next question is, what advice or encouragement do you have for high school students interested in conservation or nature, but hesitant to get started? This is from a public high school teacher in Minnesota.
Increasingly in the coming years, we will need people in the conservation sector. It's going to be a growth sector. Green is growth, okay? Because as we face the looming threat of climate change, the reality of climate change, and think through and work out and discover and rediscover and adapt, the measures that we will need to deal with climate change. I never worked a day in my entire life. In all the time that I've been doing this conservation activity, I have never felt that I was working, because they say if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life.
Totally can relate to that. All right. Judy wants to know, you fell in love with nature in a place with a lot of nature. What do you think about engaging people who grew up in an urban setting?
Yes. So was it early this year? I can't remember. Might have been last year in February. Yes. My girlfriend, who has lived in Harlem for 50 years, lives across from Morningside Park. So there's nature in Harlem. There's nature everywhere. We are part of nature. There's nothing outside of nature. Everything that human beings use and are on earth is part of nature, right? There's nothing here but that. So if you come from that perspective and you're inviting somebody from the urban area into the outdoors, I usually like to start off people's first experience with a wow. So, I love taking people to places like the Everglades for their first experience, or the Grand Canyon, or just some place where they have an expanse of beauty that really has an impact on the soul. That's my favorite thing to do. But if I can't do that, I would just like to take somebody from a deeply urban area into a pleasant park. It shouldn't be too far off the beaten path. They should have family or friends with them. They should be going with somebody that they trust. Okay, that's a very important factor. They should certainly have people in the group that look like them. They should know what they're going to do. And actually, if you look at it, even in the urban centers, there are people out in the city parks, right? There are people doing barbecues. There are people experiencing nature in ways that are not necessarily national parks and forests. But also find out what the stories are around those places. One of the things that we have found about the national parks is the national parks is full of stories about the contributions of Black people and Latino people and Asian people and white people, and of course, indigenous people. All the stories of the formation of America are in the national parks. But, the majority of Americans don't know them. So whatever unit of the public land system you are with, it's helpful to find out what the stories of diversity are in that place and tell those stories so that people feel included. So you're not just telling the story of the white man who, rode with his wife and children and went west. When you come to find out actually that it was the Buffalo Soldiers who guarded the Western migration from places like Fort Davis on, in Texas, So find the stories, tell people the stories, tell people what they're going to get from being outside, lend them your binoculars so that they can, look at the birds. You be excited about the birds because it is your sense of excitement or your sense of tranquility that is going to make the difference to them and helping them feel comfortable and at home,
Thanks. We have a couple more questions, and then just a reminder that we're going to be moving into chat or discussion rooms so that we can break out rooms and have separate conversations. But our next question is, has eBird helped you with outreach?
Say again?
Has using eBird, the citizen or community science program through Cornell, has it helped you with outreach?
I haven't used it, so my bad.
No problem. All right. Any other questions? It looks like I think that's all the questions that I'm seeing right now. So I am going to hand it off to and thank you again. Thank you everyone for who posted questions. One other question that was in there was about whether this recording will be shared, and there will be a follow-up email so that you'll have the recording of this as well. So with that, I'm going to introduce Alana Fetterman, who is an outreach manager with the Friends of the Forest Preserves. Just a few more words for us.
Thank you, Stephanie. Before we move on, I also just wanted to give a heartfelt thank you to Audrey. I've been following the chat box, and you've clearly inspired many people. And thank you to everyone who's here tonight. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. As the outreach manager at Friends of the Forest Preserves, I do spend quite a bit of time encouraging people to spend time outside and spend time enjoying nature. And I want to provide or offer maybe a new challenge, both to myself and to everyone here, a challenge inspired by Audrey, that the next time you do go outside, let's maybe try to fall in love with ourselves. Let's let's try to fall in love with ourselves in order to fall in love with all of creation. I think that is those are such beautiful words. So I thank you for that. I thank you for that idea. And this is a challenge again that I will take on myself, and I encourage everyone to join me. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Jeanette Pescatelli. She is the Guest Experience and Engagement Manager at the Peggy Notebaert Nature Museum.
Wow.
Thank you so much, Alana. Yeah, and again, on behalf of the Peggy Notebaert Nature Museum and the whole Compelling Voices in Birding and Conservation team, thank you so much, Audrey. That was a truly compelling program, and it was so enjoyable to have you tonight. And thanks again to our partners from the Friends of the Forest Preserves and the U.S. Forest Service for your support tonight. Thanks for helping us make this event happen. So though this year has definitely thrown us a lot of curveballs, the partnership between the Peggy Notebaert Nature Museum, the Chicago Ornithological Society, and the Chicago Audubon Society will continue and bring another awesome series of compelling voices in birding and conservation in 2021. So please stay tuned. Whether it's going to be virtual or in person, we're going to put together an awesome series to gather diverse and insightful voices in the birding community. So please stay tuned. Details to come for the next series.